Recording the session. And I'll share my screen. Let me share my screen so you can see what I can see. Hold on just a second. Good morning, Joe. I can see you're out and about walking.
I'm just on my way home.
Oh, I thought you were multitasking this morning.
Well, no, I needed to go for a quick run, but I thought I'd just make it back, but I'm obviously a few minutes late. So
not a PB today, then, Joe. No.
No, it's always a PB because it's quicker to walk than my running.
Okay, let's thanks for joining us, Joe. And Eustace is with us as well. Good morning, Eustace. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Apologies for being a couple minutes late there.
That's okay. I always expect it, actually. There's always a few people that are kind of moving from one meeting to another, so don't worry. Thanks for joining us, Eustace. Good to see you.
Appreciate it.
So let's make a start. We're going to run this morning's session the same way that we run each of the weekly sessions. So I will share some insights and some ideas with you over the first 15, 20 minutes or so. Then I will invite you to have a conversation with your peers about what that means for you, and hopefully give you a chance just to process not only what we've talked about, but also share some of your own ideas, share some of the things that you're doing and the best practice, so that you've got the chance to really think about what this means for you and how you can start to integrate what we're talking about. So this morning is about creating a high performance team, and it's an interesting title because, well, I think it is anyway, because it could mean anything, right? It could mean anything. And what I want to do this morning is share some ideas with you that perhaps aren't the same as everybody else, talks about. So there's some things you can do that are quite obvious. We'll try and do a couple of things this morning that perhaps are a bit less obvious in terms of what we can do to create a high performance team. So reminder that these Friday morning workshops, the idea is that it gives you some thinking time. So they are an opportunity to get off the treadmill, although Joe is counter to that because Joe's walking as we're talking. But actually, I encourage that as well, right? But it's an opportunity to slow down, not think about, all the day-to-day stuff you've got to do, and think more strategically, a bit more long-term about what you're trying to achieve. And this morning's session, hopefully, is a good example of us being able to do that. So we'll talk about creating a high-performance team. We'll look through a few lenses this morning. We'll talk about internal motivation, like your motivation, and we'll talk about what that means for your teams and their internal or intrinsic motivation. And then I want to share with you an exercise that I've done many times in the past, and I've done this with teams that I've led, and I've also done it with client teams where they want the kind of exercise that we'll talk about facilitated. So there's a couple of options in terms of the way that I'll describe that part of this morning's session. That'll take about 20 minutes. Then I'll ask you to go into breakout rooms. And then the final part of the session, we'll invite you back, take some feedback, and we'll wrap up our session by the end of the day. Okay. So I'm sure you've heard the Mark Twain quote, right? And it's interestingly, it's more important to us. I think as you progress through your career, this becomes more important to you. Once you realize that time and life is finite, you kind of start thinking, actually, I might need to pay a bit more attention to that. But this quote that the two most important days of your life are the day that you're born and then the day you find out why you were born. And that's very, very personal, right? It is specific to you. Each of us have a different motivators, different reasons why we do what we do and what's important to us. And it's really interesting. I ask these two questions at the start of most of the work I do, either with clients or at programs. And I'd love for you to just reflect on these questions. And if you are in a position to do it, I'd love for you to share these into the chat, right? So the answer to these two questions, the first one is, what do you love most about your role, the work that you're doing right now? The second is, why is it important that you succeed? And this isn't like because the company needs me to. This is personally for you. Why is it important that you succeed? So I'd love to just take a moment to reflect on those two questions. I'll share while you're reflecting on it, and drop it into the chat if you would, please. So what do you love most about your role? Why is it important that you succeed? That as I've gone through my career, it's kind of changed a bit. So what I used to love when I was first in sales and kind of business development roles, I used to love the thrill of the chase. I used to love meeting new customers, seeing if I could engage them, seeing if I could turn that into real opportunity for my business and for me. That was really a huge driver for me when I first started. As I went through my career, it kind of shifted. I then found that I enjoyed more working with teams, being part of a team, supporting them and starting to see them thrive, develop and grow. And then as I kind of progressed even further, it was actually about the businesses that I worked in and were we making an impact and what impact did that have? And how did we start to really kind of help everyone to join up and align with that impact? So I think it does change. I've experienced it changes throughout your career. And then the answer to why is it important that you succeed? Again, earlier in my career, it was more about progression, financial gain, being able to provide security for my family, all that stuff. And then as my children got older, I found that for me, it was also teaching them that things were possible, so that they started to see the world through a lens of possibility, not restriction or restraint. And that was really important. So it's a big part of what drives me, is being able to demonstrate to my children what's possible. And so, it changes as we go through life. But I'd love to hear, you can either drop it in the chat or you can come off mute and share yours. I'd love to hear a couple of examples. Who'd like to give us a couple of examples or responses to these two questions? Who's feeling brave this morning?
I can go for it, Justin, if you want to.
Thank you. Yeah.
So for mine, I think, what do you love most about your role? My role is sales manager currently.
Yeah.
And I think I love helping the team creating or achieving the larger targets. So if we have larger potential deals to facilitate and just help out to sort of get there, that's something that gives me a lot of motivation in general to sort of achieve that. Before, it was really just doing the sales myself, and now it's really trying to make sure that the team is actually reaching those targets. And the second, why is it important that you succeed? It's a little bit, I think that's a difficult one for me to answer. I think for myself, I just want to make sure I can do the best that I can, and I want to reach the targets that I set. I have the option to sort of set all the targets for the company for the year on the sales side. So it's more important to sort of make sure I've set that correctly, and therefore I would like to succeed, to make sure that everybody is motivated. I don't want to set the targets too high or too low. So it's a bit of a balance there for me personally.
Yeah. So sounds like there's also used a bit of personal pride in there. You've set some targets, you want to be able to achieve them, you want the team to feel connected and empowered to join you on that journey as well.
Yeah, correct, definitely.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Hugh. And I don't know if you've thought about these types of questions before today.
Today, not yet. No.
No. And it's interesting because I think that's equally important. That very often we don't think about these types of questions and the answers to these types of questions, and so we find ourselves just kind of doing the day-to-day tasks without joining up to a bigger picture for ourselves. I know there'll be a company target, there'll be objectives and goals and that kind of thing, but actually thinking about internal motivation is the next level of that intrinsic drive that we create. So I asked you these questions. Thank you for stepping up and answering. I really appreciate it. Otherwise, it could have been a very quiet couple of minutes. So I appreciate you supporting me there. But those two questions, if you haven't had the chance to talk to your teams about the answers to those two questions from their perspective, it's a really valuable thing to do, because everyone will give you a slightly different answer depending on what's going on in their life, where they are in terms of their performance, and where they are in terms of what's happening more generally around them. And actually, we can make some assumptions that people want the same thing, and very often they don't. So being able to ask those questions, get people to articulate it, give them the space to answer, and then work through actually how do we create a plan together that gives that person the opportunity then to really thrive and do what they love most in their role, and really tap into that success intrinsic motivation. So the reason we do this is because we think about very often in businesses we talk about what we want to achieve, and we talk about how we're going to do it, right? So we do the what and the how. And actually, in order to find intrinsic motivation, and I just realised actually I've stopped sharing my screen, so I'm going to catch myself before I go on for too much longer. So this is you'll all have heard the golden circle from Simon Sinek, where he talks about find your why. And this is, I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because what and how are really, really obvious. This is what we're trying to achieve. Here are some things we can do to get there. But where the true motivation lies is to go below the surface and get to the why. Why is that important? And I think about actually when you ask the questions that we ask our teams and ourselves to find motivation, we should ask them in this order. We should ask, what are we trying to achieve? We should then ask, why is that important? Because that finds the motivation. Then we should say, now that we know what and why, how should we go about it? Because the answers are slightly different when people understand why they want to do something. They're much more committed to finding a way. And sometimes if we meet, some hesitation in our teams, or I don't know, or a bit of mediocre performance, stepping back and saying, actually, if I ask this why question, have I got that person to think more deeply about their own motivation, can be really powerful. And we remember this in the context of creating high performance teams. So actually at an individual level, making sure that as leaders of our teams, we understand that intrinsic motivation for everyone in our team is really transformational. It really does change the dynamic of the conversations going forward from that point. But without that understanding, we tend to sit with quite generic conversations about where are you against expectations, what's happening here with this customer, with this client, where are you with this opportunity? It's very transactional. We want things to become transformational. We do that by understanding why people really want to succeed and for them, what's motivating them. So we take that time to understand our team's motivation, and then there is we've got motivation, the connection that has to the team, and once everybody understands their own motivations, and I very often will do this in group environments, so we'll ask people to share that why answer as a team, so individually but as a team, and then the team start to go, oh right, for John it's something different than it is for me, for Sue it's something different than it is for me, and we can everyone can then start to understand, okay, what's driving each other to be successful. And that's really useful because it creates some common language, but also some variety in terms of what people are trying to achieve and why. And then the second thing I do, so that's one part of it, is internal motivation. The second thing I've done that's been really useful is an exercise I call a team charter exercise. Okay, so in the first instance, we've got individual motivation conversations. In the second instance, we've then got a team charter exercise. And this is something that I very rarely see this done in businesses, but it's really powerful, especially when you've got, quite a tight-knit team. So what you do is in an upcoming team meeting, you create some space in the agenda, maybe an hour. It's about an hour is about the right amount of time. And you give everyone a Post-it note and you say, we're going to run this team charter exercise. And what we're going to ask you to do is write down the answer to the questions we're going to ask in a moment, okay? And we'd like you to put one answer per Post-it note. So once you've written a word or a phrase or a couple of words, you then take that off. That's your first answer, and you keep going, right? So you continue to answer the different questions until you kind of dry up. And that process takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, and then once everybody's got these answers, you'll end up with a big pile, depending on the size of your team. You'll end up with a big pile of probably 100 or so Post-it notes. Then you put all the Post-it notes up on a wall or on a table, and then you start to cluster them into groups of answers that are similar. And what you'll be surprised at just how much commonality there is amongst your teams, and we'll show you the questions in a minute. And then we write them up in a team charter or contract, and we start to share that at our meetings. We display it in a prominent area where you're working, and we start to then use that as a way to create commitment as a team to how you're going to operate and perform going forwards. And it does kind of surface some motivation questions and some values questions, or some values answers, I should say. So here are some of the questions. Here's some examples of questions, right? So how do I want our team to interact with each other? What are my expectations of other team members? What can they expect from me? How do I want to be treated? How will I commit to treating other people? How do I want to feel during and after working together? How should we work together? What type of support do we want to offer each other? What standards will we meet? What will we aspire to achieve with each other? And then describe our perfect working relationships. So these are some example questions. You can tailor these or make your own questions. But the whole idea here is we want people to start to think about how they want to operate in the ultimate environment and what they'll do to commit to that environment, to creating that environment. Because we know the environment dictates performance, right? We create the best environment, people will perform at another level. And we really have to think about this in all sorts of areas of our work and our business and our life, actually. But for this exercise, it can be really powerful in aligning your team, getting them all on the same page, and then creating a representation of this session. And I've done this a few times, as I said. Here's one example of the output of one of my team charter exercises. And you can call it team charter, you can call it team contract. I've recently changed it to team charter. I think contract can sometimes feel a little bit too formal, whereas team charter is a bit more connected to the entire team and getting their engagement. But this was one of the team contracts I had with one of my teams. So this was after an exercise that we'd conducted together. So what did they want? They came up with, we want to have fun, we want to be energized, we want to be helpful and interactive, we want to be motivational, we want to feel motivated after meetings with each other, we want to be highly productive, we want to work with this work together family was something that came out, that and the combination of team spirit and team pride. There was an interesting one about keeping one-to-ones outside of meetings. So sometimes, you get in meetings and you've kind of got everyone in the room, and then there'll be a couple of people just split off and start a separate conversation while the broader conversation's going on. So people had noticed that and they said, well, I don't like that happening in meetings. Once we had our team charter in place, we were able to call that out in meetings. So if it happened, we'd say, guys, do you remember in the team charter, we said we'd keep those one-to-ones outside of meetings? And people would go, oh, yes, of course. Then we talk about sharing success. We talked about constructive feedback and challenging each other and learning from each other, encouraging each other, and then supporting each other supporting each other and working in a supportive environment. And that was about saying it's okay to make mistakes. So we want people to make mistakes. If we're making mistakes, it means we're taking risks. And then a couple of things about the support being emotional and from a business guidance perspective. So we use that as our framework. Joe, you've raised your hand. Thanks for raising your hand. How can I help?
Hello, just a quick question. How often would you suggest? About every 6 months? And what happens if you get a new team member in? Would you just update it for their comments, or would you wait until the next full review?
Yeah, good question. So I would start every team meeting reviewing the team charter. So I'd bring it up at the start. So we used to have monthly team meetings. The first 5 minutes was working through the team charter. I used to ask someone different in the team just to share one at the start of every team meeting, just to share their experience of kind of living the team contract or the team charter that month. And that would include them saying, I noticed a couple of members of our team did this really well this month. I just want to call them out and say thanks because they did this for me, or this happened. That was really powerful to try and make it live. When I had new people coming into the business, I would basically work through the exercise with them in their induction. So I'd ask them those questions, get them to kind of write some thoughts down. I'd then share our team charter and say, how do you think this fits with what you've answered? And it was a bit like a coaching exercise. But what was amazing was the amount of times when I'd have a conversation with a new member, new incoming member of the team, and their answers were like 60, 70% aligned with the team contract. And it just, coming in, it really was quite useful for me to be able to say, this is what as a team we've committed to, and I'd love for you to be on board with that, but also then to fine tune it and tweak it. We used to have this, so someone else would own this, and once every 6 months or so, someone might change the color scheme, or they might change the design of it, or drop it into a word cloud. And that was the point at which we could update it and add other items if we wanted to. But actually, this stayed fairly. You know, I ran this business team for about 2.5 years, and this stayed pretty stable for those 2.5 years. Thanks for the questions, Joe. Really good, really good. Hopefully that answered them for you. Okay, good. So that's the formal part of this session. Let me stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to give you the chance now. We've got a good group this morning, so I'm going to give you the chance to talk with your colleagues in breakout rooms. Let's have a look. How many are we going to create? Yeah, we'll create 3 rooms this morning because we've got 10 people. So 3 rooms, and just share whatever's important for you this morning. So we'll have 15 minutes, so that because there's 3 people in 2 of the rooms, 4 in another. So we'll have 15 minutes, which gives everyone about 5 minutes to share, ask questions, and just kind of give some ideas about what it is you want to do as a result of this session. And share and understand from each other best practice. Then we'll regroup at about 22. Just take some feedback from each group, and then we'll wrap up by 10 to 5 to 10 o'clock here by the UK time. Okay, brilliant. I hope you enjoy your conversations, and yeah, look forward to hearing back from you in about 15 minutes. See you back here. It goes so quick, that 15 minutes. It goes like lightning. Okay, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts. We had a few changes in the groups. I joined Angelica and Beth because they lost Paula, because Paula had another commitment at 9:30. But I'd love to hear from the group. So let's work through group by group. Group 1 was Eust, Matt, and Pretty. I'd love to hear your kind of feedback on what you discussed, and you know, some of the key insights or actions that you had. Who'd like to share from our group, from that group?
Do you want to go ahead, or should I?
Yeah, we weren't fully able. We didn't have enough time to make up a plan and a strategy on how we were going to approach this. We just cut off. That's all right. We discussed a couple of different things. We're all in slightly different scenarios, sizes, and etc., and working all in one office or working more on the remote basis, which can change some items.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up also for myself is, based on your example, is certain items might change due to where they are in life, age-wise, or just what their own personal goals are, to sort of make sure that those align.
Yeah.
And Matt brought up that's part of the exercise. Obviously, should make sure that they come closer and we can find the commonalities within the team and sort of write those up as the team contract, or however you want to call it, to sort of make sure that everybody feels like they fit in. Where Christy mentions, like, based on building the growing team that she has, to sort of make sure you find the people that fit in that chemistry already.
Yeah.
Will greatly benefit the growth of that too. But that is always a challenge, to sort of find the right people to fit in and to make sure they are incorporated. And as Christy said, maybe it's better to sooner let people go if they aren't the right fit, to sort of make sure it's like, okay, then we need to find someone else that can make that happen for us and make the right fit in the team. Matt, did I forget anything?
No, I think that there's also another aspect of having a common goal, so motivation, the same kind of motivation for the organization, and personal development and ambitions. So understanding what they are and see how that kind of can be aligned to the business objectives. So, it might be compensation plans, it might be personal development, it might be the ability for that person to grow or to give them tasks. So, that they feel, valued. So that task, the input kind of that comes out of that would be something that you might bring into the business. But these are just things off the top of our head. We didn't get a really good chance to speak about a lot of this stuff, but I think really, it's about how do you motivate people, how do they buy into the business, and how do you make them feel as if they're achieving their goals.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, Eust. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, some really good insights. And I like, we talked about recruitment as well, because recruitment's a challenge for a lot of people at the moment. Finding quality people who will commit, who want to, you know, deliver at their best. And actually, Pretty's point, you know, you'll all have heard the phrase hire slow, fire fast, right? Take your time, get the right person. If they're not right, spot those early signals, because a bad person in a team can you know, create all sorts of issues for you. So figure that out early on. That's why exercises like Team Charter, if you start to sense any disconnection or misalignment from that in those early conversations, it's a really good way to calibrate where an incoming person is versus where you and your team are today. And you know, you do want to protect that. Once you've got a really good team dynamic and culture, you want to try and protect that as much as possible. Yeah, very good. Thanks, Hughes. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Pretty. So room 2 was Beth, Angelica, and I was in that room as well. So is that me ringing? No, it's not, is it? No. Okay. It was so loud, I thought, is that me? Okay. And Angelica, Beth, who would like to feed back? You're both on mute, by the way, if you're both
I
speaking.
don't mind feeding back.
Ah, thanks, Beth.
So in our session, we just discussed about the team charter, and because my company is quite a smaller company, we discussed that it would probably be more interesting to do it as a bigger company rather than just the sales team, because we feel like, for example, the sales team will have a completely different mindset and motivators versus an engineering team. So it'd be interesting to see the differences and also see if any of those align. And then we know where we can go to improve communication between the teams and motivation across the company. Because at the end of the day, the whole company has the same end goal. So it would be quite interesting to run this as a company and see where the differences and the similarities lie.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thanks, Beth. And I think we talked about, you know, I've had experience of doing both, and it's really a useful exercise, actually, to be able to run that exercise and then to have the conversations afterwards with your, you know, different functions to kind of get that. I like to think of it as calibration, you know, calibration and alignment. I think is probably the best way to think about it, because you know, once it's in place, actually it's then just about helping people to just maintain that commitment to it and alignment with what you've agreed. Yeah, it's good. Thank you, Beth. Anything else, Beth, that you wanted to share?
We just discussed as well how it is interesting to ask the why question when you are asking people what motivates them, because two people may have the same motivator as money, for example, but when you speak about the why, one person's why might be to provide for their family, and another person's why might be so they can buy the fancy things. So it also then puts it into perspective as well. By digging a bit deeper, you get to know people's real reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Very good. Thanks, Beth. Excellent. Yeah, good feedback. Thank you. And then finally, group 3 was Alex, Joe, and Nigel. Who would like to share from your group?
I don't mind.
Thanks, Joe.
So basically, I said I've got a group of volunteers, and the trouble for me is because they're all so busy, getting them all on one Zoom meeting at the same time. So actually, probably I would run it in the mini teams that they're in.
Yeah.
And then could send an email to let everybody know the overall thing. But it's with the volunteers, it's a continual cycle of trying to keep them motivated, because they could drop off at any time. And so I'm always kind of checking in and making sure, you know, if they're getting the feedback about every activity, every task, and you know, hopefully, you know, at the induction, I'm finding out what their motivations are and what they're looking to get out of it anyway. But I think it's really good for me. And yeah, I like I said, because of the difficulty in getting everyone together, we haven't had a big meeting yet. We've had like little mini team meetings, so I'll consider doing that. Nigel said he's thinking about retiring, so you know, he's done it all. This is, you know, this is bread and butter for Nigel. He doesn't even have to think about this. He's such a great team leader. It doesn't even need saying. And Alex is just setting up a new team, so he's looking to grow from 3 to 8 or maybe 9 by the end of the year.
Wow.
So it's a bit like the other one about the recruitment thing and making sure that, you know, people are going to work well together and share the vision and kind of aligning together. But it was interesting. One thing with all his vast experience, one thing that Nigel said was, you're always going to have, it's impossible to keep everyone happy all the time. You're always going to have people that are going to require further, you know, more input, more encouragement and whatever. And also, even if you've got the best salesperson in the world or whoever, you know, team member, we're all humans. Everyone's going to have ups and downs, aren't they? So, you know, there's going to be times when people are going to be more motivated than others.
Yeah. So
I don't know if I've missed anything out there, guys.
Very good. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, Alex. Really good conversation. I remember my second sales management role. I was in a medical business in 3M, and we were basically, it was a growth business. And I started on a new region. I had 2 people. I had to build a team of 9. So I recruited 7 people. It took me a year. And I'll always remember, for 7 people I interviewed, I think it was 56 people to get my 7. And I learned a lot in that year about interviewing, get it, you know, and actually had to do a couple of people twice because I selected wrong. It was the first time I'd really been actively recruiting. And it's so important to get the right fit and the right person in the team. And all the things we're talking about help you get that, you know, that sense of acuity around who's right, who's a right fit, who's a wrong fit. One of the most important things I learned in interviews, certainly second stage, was the importance of practical things. Get people to do practical things. In sales roles, I'm a massive fan of role play, like surprise role play. Don't let them know it's coming. Just like, oh, so that's how you operate with a customer. Let's do it. And they go, what do you mean? Well, let me be the customer. And then you see what they default to, because when people are stressed, they default to what they're going to do in the field. And it's really interesting. Anyway, that's another story for another day. Thanks, everybody. Really good feedback. Really enjoyed hearing your key actions and takeaways. Thank you. Right, I've got a couple of things I'd like to share, and then we'll wrap up. So let me share my screen. Some of you who have been on here each week, you will have seen these slides, but you know what it's like when you've seen something before. Seeing it again is an opportunity just to look at it again through another lens. This is our coach model. This is the roadmap for leadership that I recommend, and that you know, a lot of the programs I run, this is what we teach, right? So we think about having a business plan. We think about strategy and tactics. What are the strategic objectives? How do we align activities with those strategic objectives? Sounds simple, but it can be really useful just to get those foundations in place, have a plan. Then we think about the relationships and building trust with our team so that they'll open up and really engage with us, and then we can coach for that next level of performance. I think about contracting, having a strategic agreement with every member of the team so that you and they are clear on how you're going to operate. We then think about setting and agreeing really clear objectives and goals so that people know what high performance and success looks like in their role, and you've documented it. We then look at action and observation. So the team take action. You have to spend some time observing them. Unless you're observing them, you can't give them the feedback and the coaching that they need. From that action and observation, it gives you the opportunity to coach them for change. So that's when coaching happens, when you're aware of the areas that they can improve, and so are they. And then finally, the H in the model is heroes in the making. This is about creating time for development planning, thinking about succession, having those succession conversations, and helping everybody to think, how do they get to where they optimally want to be? For some people, that might be world-class at what they do. For other people, it might be, you know, running the company in future. And I had people that worked for me, and within 5 years, I was working for them. And it happened to me a couple of times. And actually, it was a real pleasure to see that development and growth in people. So that's our plan. That's our coach model. It's a mnemonic, so you can follow it. It's really, really useful. And it's in the book, Coaching Leaders. I'm also, you know, over the years, I've learned what it takes for me to have become successful as a leader, or felt at least like I had the right criteria for success. There are 5 things that are important to me, and I think they're important to us all as leaders. having confidential spaces where you can have conversations that don't go any further, being part of a community that can support you and champion you and give you feedback when you need it, people that you can collaborate with so you can share and learn ideas, people who challenge your thinking so that you don't just get people around you saying, yes, that's great. And then people who hold you accountable so that you make a commitment and follow through on your commitments. Those 5 things are really important. If you haven't got, if there's a gap in any of those, you'll find you're not quite on top form. So share those because it's useful for me. We build those into all of our programs. If you'd like to know any more about that, then feel free to let me know. I'll gladly share that with you. I also would offer you a coaching session. A number of you have taken me up on this. Thank you so much. My current coaching link to my diary is not working, so I've got a Calendly link instead. I'm just putting that in the chat right now. You'll see that. And then next week, I'm out on Friday because I'm down in London, but I am going to be running this session on Thursday morning, and I've got a good friend of mine and a client, a guy called Chris Moore. Chris is the national sales manager for this company called Actian UK, and Chris is someone who has actually, over the last couple of years since he's been a sales manager, done some really interesting things with his team. And I've asked him if he would be happy to share some of the things he's worked on, some of the initiatives in a conversation with me next week. So next Thursday morning, a bit of a shift, a bit of a change in dynamic. It's a conversation with Chris Moore, National Sales Manager at Actian UK, and we're going to unpack what he's done over the last couple of years, which hopefully will be useful for you as well to start to think about, what is it you could do and learn from someone. We'll open it up to Q&A as well. So hopefully that's an interesting topic for next week, live Q&A with Chris Moore. Okay, that is everything I wanted to share with you today. We're at 4 minutes to the hour, so you've got a couple of minutes between now and your next session. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining me. Thanks for engaging. I really appreciate it. If you didn't turn up, I'd be running these on my own. So I appreciate you being here. And if anybody would like to take me up on the one-to-one, feel free. Look forward to seeing you. Otherwise, hopefully have a great weekend when you get there, and I'll see you at next week's workshop. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate
Thank
it, Justin.
you.
Thanks.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
See you soon. Thanks. Bye.